Welcome, and thanks for stopping by. Whether you're new to the channel or have been here before, if you enjoyed this video, please consider hitting that like and subscribe button. Today I want to take a quick look at addressing a common issue amongst folding knives, and that's lock stick. If you're unfamiliar with lock stick, it's very common in folding knives, and what it is the engagement here between your lock bar, and in this case we're looking at a frame lock, where it meets with the tang on the blade. You can see that engagement right there. What happens is there's a little bit of interference between those, and when you go to push to remove the lock bar, you can feel it kind of stick. On a lot of knives, it's not a big deal. Like this particular Spyderco, this Spidey Chef, it has very minimal lock stick to where it's not a big deal, and it actually helps to keep from having lock rock or slip. But in some knives, it can be hard to the point where you need to really crank down on it. Depending on what type of action you have, this Benchmade, for instance, this has what's referred to as their axis lock. As you can see, it doesn't have the traditional tang engagement. It engages here on the back. You can see this bar that slips back and forth, and it engages in a similar manner as far as having the tang that you can see down in there. But what happens is this pops on top of that. Fundamentally, it's the same general concept as far as that engagement and how you can get stick, but it's important to understand the mechanisms to know how best to treat it. Thankfully, the common repairs to at least make this better are relatively easy to do, and I'm going to show a couple tricks here to do it at home. And the main one that I recommend, you actually don't even have to take the knife apart or anything. So let's first look at this Benchmade. The very first thing that I always recommend doing before you start working on any of this is to actually clean up the engagement. So what you're going to want to do is I'd take just a Q-tip with rubbing alcohol, and you're going to want to clean off and ensure that there's no oil on the blade there. And then similarly, I would do the same with the axis lock action through there. The reason for that being, you'll definitely want to avoid the thought of putting an oil on that to reduce. While it does work for bearing surfaces, that's great for putting on your bushings and to smooth things out along those lines, it actually counterintuitively can increase lock stick. So that's something you want to make sure that you remove all oil from that area. That may in and of itself help your lock stick, or might have been contributing to or causing that lock stick. Once you have done that, the main thing that I recommend is just taking a standard number 2 pencil. You can use the mechanical style, which is my personal preference, or you can just use a traditional pencil as well. And what you're going to want to do is apply this, and with the Benchmade, I've found that you can actually get the axis lock itself that's sticky. And you can see right here, this has this metal surface, and what occurs there is as this bar slides along, that can create some stick. So that's not traditional lock stick where it's between the blade and the locking mechanism. So what I do is I just take the pencil here, and you're just going to rub that around, and what this does is this leaves some graphite behind. Do all over the flat there, and on this inner part, make sure you get around that on the inside of the lip. Then you can come to the back here and do that on both sides. You can come to the back, and I would put it on this engagement bar as well. So just rub that around. Then for an axis lock, it's usually easiest if you close it, and that gets you better access to the blade tang here. And you're going to want to do the same thing. Just rub that along, and that will leave the graphite behind. And you'll find that generally will really smooth things out. Doing the same thing on lock bar for a frame lock. This one's even a little easier to access. All you're going to do is, again, usually easiest to close, and of course clean this up in advance. But all you want to do, and you can see where this engages here. So that's that part. So you just follow that back as you close this knife, and you can see that comes around, and you can see the rub marks right on there. And then you're just sorry, off camera there. You're just going to take and rub the graphite along there. And then you'll want to do the same thing and ensure you get it on the blade tang, or I'm sorry, the frame lock there. And what that will do is that just gets that little bit of graphite between the two, work that in, and you can see that already smoothed it out. In the case of a Spyderco, specifically the Spidey Chef, I've found that it also responds well to another method, which is just applying a Sharpie. This one I do recommend that you take the knife apart so you can get easier access. For the tang, you can get to that, but it's kind of far down in there. So it's easiest if you take this apart and all you're going to do is just Sharpie along that, clean it up again with the rubbing alcohol, get that nice and clean and dry, and then just apply some Sharpie. And then I would do the same thing on the lock bar, and this is just going to take on the face right there and just apply some Sharpie. This is something, it won't last forever, but you can reapply it periodically. What a lot of times I've found is as the knives break in, that tends to get better. So especially if you're dealing with a new knife and encountering lock stick, going through this simple method can help to get through the break-in period. So it adds, effectively, especially with the graphite, it adds a form of dry lubricant, and that will help the surfaces to mate a little better. Also, another suggestion, in the case of Benchmades especially, they're notorious for having centering issues. That can also exacerbate some roughness in the axis lock feel. What you can do for that is just make sure that you first center your blade, and I'm going to produce another video on some easy tips and suggestions on how to center a knife blade. But doing these few things, you'll find will really help to speed up your axis lock or your in general lock break-in. So I hope this is helpful. If you have any questions, feel free to post comments in the description, and I'll be happy to do the best I can to walk you through. Thanks.